Hey there, this is Jody Clock, and welcome to my podcast, I Woke Up Dead, Now What? In our conversations, we'll talk about real issues that everyday people face should they wake up dead without a life after death plan in place. Join me as we explore the how-tos on preparing for you or your loved one's passing without breaking the bank. And let's not forget about those pets too. Now, don't you fall asleep. Hey, this is Jody Clock, and welcome to my podcast, I Woke Up Dead, Now What? Today's topic is a little unusual, but there's a time when every pet parent is going to have to cross this sensitive topic. So I'm just going to give you some guidelines. Today, we're going to talk about what to do when your pet dies at home. I'm going to share with you a step-by-step guide with exactly what to do. And everything that I am sharing with you is available and downloadable on my website, clocktimelesspets.com, and on jodyclock.com. There is an infographic that can share with you all the things you need to do until the next day when you figure out what to do. Many of you listeners may know that I have a pet loss business. What a pet loss business simply is the equivalent to a pet funeral home. We offer to pet parents, and then we also do work with some vet clinics, private cremations. We will assist with burials. We are all certified in pet loss grief companioning, which is very similar to grief counseling. And this little hobby has turned into a big business. The reason I share this is I got into this business because we had a therapy dog named Max. He was a Sheltie. And when he crossed over to that Rainbow Bridge, I looked into what happened at pet cremation centers, and I just didn't like it. So I was an early pioneer of championing private pet cremations that mirror a human cremation. Just so you know, there are no laws with how animals in general are cremated or buried. It's like the wild, wild west, and they treat pets like property. But nonetheless, I'd like to talk to you about what do you do when you come home and you find your precious pet deceased or is not breathing. Well, I just said it. The very first thing you want to do is you want to take a minute and pause and get right up close to that pet and see if that pet is actually breathing. I don't know how many times someone has brought their cat or doggy to us and the pet hadn't transitioned yet. So you're going to want to make sure that that pet is actually deceased. And I had that happen to me myself. I had a family cat. Her name was Bonnie Cat. And Bonnie Cat lived to be 22 years old. She grew up with my son. He graduated, she stayed. He went to college and graduated, she stayed. And then he moved on in life, and Bonnie Cat finally crossed that Rainbow Bridge. But the last probably 2 years of her life, she was very frail. She was in great shape, but she would get herself in such a sleep and so lethargic that her breathing was shallow. And I don't know how many times I really thought that she was dead. And then I would go to touch her and I'd startle her. And, she's a little mad and miffed that I interrupted her little kitty dreams. So the very first thing you want to do is make sure, in fact, that they are dead. I know that sounds strange, but it is not uncommon. But if this is the case and they are not dead and you can see that they are transitioning, don't move them. Let them transition on their own unless you can clearly see they are suffering. Keep the area very calm and quiet. And if at all possible, filled with love at that moment, and sit quietly with them until they have transitioned. After your pet has died, or if in fact you know that your pet has transitioned when you came home and is deceased, if there are other pets in the home, allow them to investigate. This is so, so important. Why? Well, they need to know that death has occurred. I don't know if you know this, but pets also grieve. If you let them investigate and sniff and go through this little process, this will help them through their grief journey. It's okay to take as much time as you need or your pets need, and no, you're not crazy. In fact, I've done this, I don't know how many times. And if you sit back and you watch it in a strange and odd way, it's kind of beautiful. When my pet had died, and I actually casketed the pet, and it was Ernie. I placed Ernie in a pet casket, and I put him out on the kitchen floor. And my other kitties and doggies, they came by. My cat, baby cat, was a Siamese flame point, actually jumped up, got in the casket and snuggled and slept there. Well, I don't know. I left the room, so it had to be a good hour or two. So at the end of the day, I then removed Ernie and I covered the casket and I took him on so we could do our next steps, which at that point in time, I made the decision to bury. Anyhow, my point is, it's not creepy. It's not going to smell. Don't worry about it. And it is something that pets need to do. It is no different than if you were sitting with your mother or your grandmother or a loved one in a hospice house and they died. Many people will call family members and let them come and say a final farewell. This really just parallels that. And it is also good so the animals don't act out in the house. Now, not saying they won't. Some cats might howl. Some dogs may have little doggy accidents or may just mope around. Don't get mad at them. They are sad and they're trying to figure out life without their little buddy. They may have acted like they didn't like that little guy, but my guess is whether they did or they didn't, that was a part of their daily routine, and their routine was now disrupted. All right, so after you've done that, what you're going to want to do is secure and swaddle that animal from wherever, if it's in his pet bed, if it was on the floor, even out in the grass. Many times animals will go outside, especially dogs, and they might go under a tree. Yep, they've also gone under porches. So you're going to want to secure them. And when you secure them, heads up, folks, it can be a little messy. It's not gross or anything, but you need to understand, just like humans, when you move a pet after death, their bowels will release. So what you're going to want to do is make sure you get a little piddle pad, or you want to get plastic or a blanket or something that you don't want back, and place it under their hindquarters. And, if you can, you might want to slide it completely under the pet. Many people also will put a blanket and then something plastic because they don't want the blanket back, and they will swaddle that animal like a baby. Now, easier said than done when you've got the little pets, but when you've got those very large animals, you still can do it. It just looks a little differently. But when you do swaddle them, very important, to the very best of your ability, you want to bring their little legs in as close to their body and bring them in as you swaddle them. And the reason for that is you want to make sure before rigor mortis sets in that their little legs are tucked in, because otherwise you're going to have an issue transporting it, especially if it's a large pet. So that's just a little trick, something that nobody will tell you, something that I have found out the hard way, and so have many others. So you're going to want to do that. Now you've got to contain, store, and transport that pet. All right. A lot of times I get a phone call in the middle of the night and people need to know what to do until morning or over the weekend until Monday. So it's very important how you contain and store your little buddy. When at all possible, you place the swaddled pet in some type of a container or a box or a basket. I say this because then you can lift that up and you can place it in a cooler spot in the home, preferably up off the floor, in a laundry room, in the garage. Some people might even place a smaller pet down in the basement. Basically, you just want to have it cool as possible. You don't need to get ice, and just kind of out of the way. A lot of people will go get those rubber totes, or they have those Rubbermaid totes, and they will place their pet in that, and then they will put the lid on it. And that's not a bad thing, especially in the summer. In the winter and the fall, it's not a problem. But in the summer, after a while, there could be a bit of an odor. So that would contain everything. And for people who live in mobile homes, or they don't have a cool porch, or they don't have a place, this has been a good solution. I know it sounds a little cold-hearted, but at this point in time, it's about treating them with love and respect. And also, we don't want any health issues. We want to keep things sanitary. Last but not least, you're going to want to contact your pet cremation provider. Or if you're going to bury your pet, many folks live on a farm, you're going to want to figure out a location to bury that pet. I'd like to talk about the burial aspect first. If you are burying a pet and you are in a field or a farm or something like that, you might want to take into consider wildlife. So you're going to want to make sure you dig that little buddy's grave down 4 to 5 feet and place them in a container that seals. So that's why I like the Rubbermaid. You can order pet caskets. They will seal. There are many of them out there. Or a lot of people will put them in a wooden box, and that's okay. But what that'll do is until things take care of themselves, it keeps them a little less of a target for wildlife, if you will, to dig. The other thing, when people want to cremate a pet, whether it's your vet clinic or you go to a place like our facility, you're going to want to call that cremation place and ask them if they have a private cremation, because chances are you're going to want to have your pet's remains back. And if you don't have a private cremation, I don't care how anybody tells you, if it's partial private, that they've separated pets in a machine, that's a bunch of hooey. Private is one animal in the cremation chamber by itself. That way you can ensure that you do get all of your pet's remains back. That process for each facility may take a little longer. So when you do take your pet to the provider, make sure you find out when to expect to come and pick up your pet. Many times they will offer a clay paw print and a fur clipping. I know that we do that. And people say they don't want it, but that's just part of what we do. And when they come back and pick up their pet, I don't know how many grown men I've seen cry. So these are just some things that if you don't know, you don't know. And if you haven't gone through it, I just wanted to give you a heads up. It's just kind of the last final act of love as a pet parent you can do for your pet. So we've come to the end of that topic. And I am going to share with you that at some point in time, we're going to talk about pet grief, because it's real, not only for the pets, but for humans. So keep listening to my podcasts and we will touch on that subject as well. But for now, I'm glad you tuned in, and I'm certainly elated. Hey, if you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you, and I am so glad you didn't wake up dead today. Please jump over to jodyclock.com and download your free copy of my family care plan. This guide will help those you leave behind should you wake up dead. I promise. Be sure to order my book, It's Complicated, based on a true story. Send me an email about topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. Until next time, thank you for not falling asleep.